Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Random Adventurers Podcast. This is the first podcast for the month of March, and part of our spring series. I'm your host, Nate, and today I'm joined in the studio by Ranger Liz.
Did you know that when you don't add plenty of space when you first start the video, I can't do a pretty fade in from black?
Huh.
Hi, everybody!
And Lich Lord Bryan.
Hello! We are currently also joined by a person on a kazoo.
And as a special guest joining us today, as our topic happens to be Fairies, Fairfolk, and Fae, Blueberry the Fairy joining us from Skype.
I don't know who that is.
Say hello, Blueberry.
Real voice now?
Hello?
Did we lose Blueberry? Are you having technical difficulties?
Hello? Little fairy.
Is she being shy?
I think she might be... I think she was just playing a prank on us.
Not funny.
Hello. Hey, I want soda.
Hello!
Hello, yes. Welcome to the podcast, Blueberry.
I don't know what's happening.
Well, we just introduced ourselves.
And you.
And you. And we said we were going to be talking tonight about fairies, fairfolk, and fae. And yay, Skype.
You Skype down?
Welcome back.
Okay, so...
I'm not used to that human magic.
It's okay. It's about as unreliable for you as it is for us. So, yes, we're going to be talking about fairies, fairfolk, and fae. So, we have an expert with us, which is always nice.
You're going to the Skype person at this point, right?
Yes, I am.
That's just fine by me. I haven't had much dealing with fairies. I can tell you a little bit about fairy dragons, but even then, I don't know a whole lot about them.
Well, Fairfolk also falls under the Fae, or fall under that thing too, which everyone knows. Everyone deals with some Fae, assuming they have any elves in the campaign.
Yeah, I just don't really consider. I kind of feel as though the average like D&D or elf and so forth really have over the years stepped away from the whole actual Fae aspect. I know people are always trying to drag them back in, but I think if you talk to the average player, they really don't.
Well, the wood elf,
them.
I would say. The high elf or Eladrin or whatever else, those are still pretty Fae connected.
Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I think the average person doesn't play them as if they're part of the Fae. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my personal noticing.
Go ahead.
Well, depending on the origin, there's a lot of different kind of fairies. I mean, even the aspect of fairies can change from the perception of peoples. We are born from the imagination of few humans.
Speaking of that, I was actually, for this topic, watching a little bit of a documentary somebody was doing on YouTube. If I can find which one it is, I'll let everyone know what documentary it was. But it was talking about how, in the Celts, they kind of believed that fairies existed in this dimension that seemed to exist in between the real world and our imagination. That they exist yet don't exist at the same time, which is something that science could not or doesn't want to accept. That kind of concept.
The Celtic fairy or Sea particularly the Sea Lords, were actually very impressive. From the terrible and quite frankly frightening wild hunts where a human or rogue fair folk would be chased across the, known world, for a night, and if they manage to survive that night and not get killed, skinned, or eaten by every fair folk in existence chasing after them, then they got to live. They got a pardon.
Yeah.
They hadn't talked about that. They were talking.
That kind of gave us a bad name.
Yeah.
Well, in a lot of cultures, fair folk are usually considered evil.
Evil or
Neutral
to trickstery. Yes.
Some of them, they were telling,
I'm saying all fairy
Yeah.
are, but
not all of them are. Like, there was a story about a shepherd that had come across some fairies that were bathing in a pond, and, he sat there watching them, and it was a bunch of female fairies, and he sat there watching them, and then eventually he stood up and started clapping and saying, good job, girls, and they all disappeared, and sort of like an elder fairy appeared behind him and said, you know what, that's the last thing you're gonna see after you go to bed tonight, and he woke up blind, and he was blind until the day he died.
Yeah, that's what you get.
By no means would I consider that really an evil act. They were just sort of,
Yep.
disciplining him in their own way.
In their own way, yep. But you'll see that throughout Celtic myths. Fairies were largely divided, and fair folk were largely divided into two categories. The unseelie, who were considered the unholy, dark, scary as all hell fairies, and the seelie, who were closer. The two words actually translate to unholy and holy from Celtic, but they are the seelie fairies were basically the nice guys who, at their worst were not as bad as the unseelie, but they would be known to pull less malicious pranks on people, or mostly to teach them a lesson. Or to help them grow as a person.
I like to...
Go ahead.
That's Lich is speaking.
No, he's not.
you might be a lagging.
Personally, I like to prank on others, but I hate to hurt people, so it's never a dangerous prank. I think the general matter, the kind of fairy I am, are not evil by any means.
Yeah.
Like you said, there is different categories, and aside from dark fairies, fairies are usually not harmful for humans.
They seem for the most part very neutral and want to keep to themselves.
Yep. I'll agree there. Most times it seems to be that way from myths. Of course, when you start talking about the nobility of fairies, things can get pretty frightening without them meaning to be necessarily frightening. For example, Mab, the Queen of the Unseelie, when she tries to do good, when the Queen of Winter, Wind, and Darkness is doing something nice, it's still going to be, frightening. And when you consider, when you get to some of those elder lords and ladies, you're talking something on the power level of a demigod, or even something along the lines of Thor or Odin that they pal around with.
It can be confusing because of how many folklore there is about us.
That is true.
Because the thing you mentioned doesn't make sense to me because it is a different knowledge from me. And I think it is the same for everyone who would think about fairies. Everyone think their own version. Maybe there's some things that come back from time to time, like common base, but in a general matter, I think every version of fairies are different and unique to each other's.
So, I think that is, a very good point. A lot of the common threads we see are the weakness to iron, or in the case of the D&D strata, it's cold iron. Mainly because I think they were trying not to make fairies, or the Fae completely vulnerable to, something that was commonly available.
Yeah.
Whereas you go to, for example, the Dresden Files, and while iron is the bane, steel has some limited effect because it's not pure iron, and anything that's coated, galvanized, doesn't hurt them much because there's something in the way of the iron.
Mm-hmm.
So now, I guess...
Yeah, actually, when it's not... sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
We won't do that every time, right?
You're our guest. You get priority to speak.
Well, that, and I'm also going to kind of do a
Okay.
wrapping up thought here. Not to end it, but just sort of like a move on to the next part that we need to be discussing when it comes to this. So go ahead with your thought.
Yeah, normally, if it's not pure iron, it doesn't affect us the same way because, it's the iron thing that affects us directly. It is a poisonous material for us. I was once wounded by an iron dagger, and it's a miracle I'm still here to talk with you. It's kind of thanks to that wizard, like there. Anyway. But yeah, usually other metal are not much of a problem, even if there is some trace of iron in them.
So it's kind of like lead with humans then.
Yep. So I guess the next thing that we need to consider is how to go about using, since we are the RPG gamers here, we need to be talking about how to apply them into games and how to use them in games. And it kind of goes into the game that you're using. I'm sure Blueberry's been on a couple of adventures, and they can be used as player characters, or they can play a role for good in an adventure, or I guess you can even use the darker fairies for enemies.
It's very true.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I know Exalted has, the Exalted campaign has a rather... They have tended to take Fairfolk as more of an enemy type thing.
They do. In the Exalted setting, the Fairfolk are pretty much the enemy of the known world. They are also playable, as a players can choose to play a Fairfolk.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately, the 2nd edition Fairfolk book, Graceful and Wicked Masks, has been known to cause sanity damage to those who try and read it.
Okay, so it's like 3.5 grapple.
It's like 3.5 Grapple had a love child with the with Cthulhu.
Yeah, I seem to remember when I first started playing 3.5, you didn't allow me to grapple. You're like, no. We're not going. That's a little more advanced than what you are ready for.
Yeah.
The other thing, which is why I have the 3.5 out, is I know the Archfey are one of the pacts that Warlocks have a tendency to get their powers from. So
Yes.
So I mean, definitely look at especially if you're going to go involved in what your Warlock, who their patron is, and especially if they're going to have any intimate dealings with said patron, you definitely look into that then. Simply because I mean that's the person granting your Warlock its abilities.
Very true. And, this goes back to what I was saying about the fairy nobility, or archfey in this case, basically being, god-level entities.
And going back to what we were saying before, that fairies do exist, supposedly between this realm of real life and imagination. Don't be afraid to apply your imagination into it.
Oh, yeah.
You are permitted, from what I could tell, to use your imagination to create the fairies that are appropriate for, especially going back to our world building, which is what we were talking about the month before. If you want fairies in that, don't be afraid to apply your own imagination to create these fairies for the world.
Very true. Also, putting your own spin on things, even if you're playing in a, standard D&D 3.5 or 5th edition, and you want to pull out a fairy, don't be afraid to take a little, spin on things and maybe change a couple of things up. Because, fairies do, as being creatures on the border between reality and dreams, are, something very spiritual, so no two are probably going to be alike. They might be similar, but not alike.
Mm-hmm.
Which is...
I have yet to find someone like me.
There we go. And so...
I said my piece.
Yep, that you did. And with that, I think it's time for us to go to our question of the week.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yep. This question comes...
Wait, before you do, you need to discuss the question from last week. Which character that do you have that you would want to have manifested into this world, and why?
Ooh, that is a tough one. Geesh. I have a bunch of actually really interesting characters. Archeo might be interesting to hang around with for a short time and learn from, but I wouldn't wish this world upon him or him upon this world. I think our society would drive him crazy. Ooh. I think I would choose Captain Ragara Jace.
And why?
Why? One, because he's the kind of guy who, as a Corsair, there's a lot of interesting stuff about him. He also, I think, is fairly adaptable, so he would be able to handle the differences in the world without going mad. And I think he'd have a lot to teach people.
Okay.
And I think he'd be able to enjoy being here. So, I mean, that's one thing I can't help but to think about, if I brought them into this world, their ability to have a decent life here.
Alrighty. And what is this week's question?
This week's question comes to us from one of our loyal viewers, and it is... If you could make appear a single character from like a GMPC or NPC from a game you have been in, who would you pick and why?
That sounds like a follow-up from the last question.
I believe it is. Yes, actually, it is a follow-up from the last question.
So you're able to take a NPC from a campaign?
Yep.
NPC from a campaign. Does it have to be somebody else's NPC or one of my own NPCs?
It could be yours or somebody else's.
Okay. Trying to think of somebody else's NPC who I enjoyed.
Trying to think of NPCs. Memorable. I'm trying to think of memorable NPCs at this point.
Apparently I haven't been
Well, you
doing a
remember
good
Bob
enough
for
job.
now, right?
Yeah, I remember Bob for now.
I don't think I'd want Bob for now in this world.
No.
It kind of would be interesting, though, would be a curse upon this world to have one of those shopkeepers from our last Saturday, or actually Saturday and Friday, the Saturday before and Friday in this world. Basically, these guys are not necessarily the smartest shopkeepers in the world, but at the same time,
any of the shopkeepers in this world, they're all retarded in that one.
Yes, they all are, but they,
Especially the first town people.
Oh.
What did I buy but just, like, pretty much some pocket lint? I forget.
I forget.
Yeah.
But there was a reason I didn't buy anything in that town.
But, yeah, some of the things that they
kill the people
sold were not necessarily, you thought they were good, and then they turned out not to be.
Yep.
So, it would be a curse upon the world, but at the same time, it would be kind of a funny one.
Yes, it would.
Consider himself more of a teacher, rather than the traditional Thamrites. So he seems he'd be more helpful, and but he still has the Thamrite goal of empowering people. So
yeah,
it's the only one I can think of at this point, unfortunately.
I'm actually gonna go with a NPC from one of your games, Bryan.
Okay.
And I'm gonna go with that Satix Bard.
Oh, God, I don't even remember. That game was just loaded with NPCs. So
Yes, it was. But honestly, she and her sister kind of stuck out to me.
Oh dear God, I forgot there were even two of them at this point.
Yep. They were very well portrayed, very interesting characters, and they'd actually put up with me. So hey.
If I were to pick a NPC from one of my own campaigns, any one of them that would be a bard that I can get on my side, or not a bard, but any one of my ones that were like a troll, and troll is in for like an internet troll type of troll, that I can keep on my side and just use them to annoy people that I don't like.
Blueberry, how about you?
I am a fragment of your imagination.
All right, you were an NPC. No, wait, you didn't hear that.
Yeah, I'm a bit sad I wasn't mentioned, so no one wants to see me in real.
I've never been in a campaign with you, so I can't say that.
It would be nice to have Blueberry. I would also mention that. I forgot that Blueberry was an NPC because Blueberry was such an integral part of the game. It felt like a PC.
Yes, you felt more like a PC than an NPC, which is why I asked you.
I miss Derek.
But Derek was a PC.
Yeah, I know.
Unfortunately, Derek died a horrible, horrible death, and I'm looking at you.
He died?
I know nothing about
Yeah, you
that.
imprisoned poor little Blueberry for how long?
I know nothing.
Let's wrap up this podcast now.
Yes,
Poor little Blueberry, who had no idea that Derek was dead, informed him of that. Or her. I'm sorry, informed her of that.
You made the fairy cry.
I know, I forgot that she did not know that Derek was dead.
Issue spoiler tags around things.
Anyway,
Anyone says I need to cry in a corner.
Yeah, I guess we need to wrap up this
yep,
podcast.
let's wrap this up. Blueberry, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll get you some honey on your way out. Maybe something to help cheer you up.
Like, comment, subscribe, pat the fairy on the back.
Give her a hug, but don't crush her.
Yeah.
And just remember,
Don't kill us for PCs.